Alrighty, welcome to another Got Questions. We're back to the Zoom style. I kind of like this one because it reminds me of Brady Bunch, but you can see all of your awesome faces. All you gentlemen are looking good today. It's good to see you. We have Mr. Randy, the co-founder, CEO, director, executive of Got Questions podcast. We have Mr. Kevin Hassenfuss, the student ministries pastor, Spartan Race extraordinaire, just reptile king. Yep, he's he's there. We have Mr. Garrett Cook, the conference room designer, CEO of the conference room, and our communications, just everything. So, welcome, gentlemen. You all look good. It's good to have you here. Good to have you here.
You're looking good too, Matt. You might introduce yourself as well.
Yes, I'm Matt. So, it is good to see everyone. So, we got a lot of questions from the students, and this week we were like, hey, what question should we do? And so what I decided to do was I had Randy on the phone, Pastor Kevin down there. He was in our office, and we looked up tough questions for Christians, and this one was it was in the top 15, and it was, isn't science enough? So Randy, I know this.
14.
What's that?
Have we answered all the other 14?
We have answered almost every other one, believe it or not. So,
True.
yeah, so we've answered almost every other one, but this one was on there besides the one that we don't want to ever talk about, which no one's guessed yet, so we haven't been able to answer that one yet, thank goodness. But Randy, this one's right up your alley. This is one that is really good. I don't know how you guys feel about it and the notes that you took from it. I have mixed reviews on this question, but Randy, why don't you kick us off so that we can start brainstorming on your level a little bit?
So I have a few different avenues. So I'll just go down one, and the start of it is science. To me, is us gaining an understanding of God's design, and not a full understanding by any stretch, but I think it's really important to recognize that we have this set of laws, and if it was just random chance and chaos, there would be no such thing as natural laws. We would not have, it wouldn't be consistent because it'd be chaotic, and it is not chaotic because our God is a God of order. He is a God of keeping things orderly and clean and right and righteous. So I think we've got to recognize that a lot of times people talk about God and science as if they're opposites. Like if you believe in God, then you don't believe in science, or if you believe in science, you don't believe in God. And that's simply not true. In my opinion, science is going through and studying. But I do want to say this. Science can talk about what is. Science does a pretty good job of doing experiments and saying, this is what is. This is what, hey, we can watch a volcano erupt and we can talk about why it did that and we can see how that works. Science does not do a good job of history. So I think we get into real trouble when we start to say, oh, because what's happening now, we assume that this crazy thing happened, 15 million years ago, if you want to go into that. That's just not accurate. And we have to be very, very careful to not put science where science isn't. And science cannot tell us what happened thousands of years ago. First of all, because it wasn't recorded. And secondly, because we don't know what the conditions were like. And without getting too scientific-y, a lot of the carbon dating and those kinds of things are based on the idea that the conditions in the world, when the world was created, are the same as the conditions of the world now. And just by the simple fact of global warming, we know that that's not necessarily true. Our environment has evolved, if you will, and I'm using a small e evolve, I'm not using the big E. So anyway, I'll throw that out there. But I have a few more things, but I don't want to monopolize the time.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Randy. Thank you, Mr. Randy. Kev Dog, what you got, homie?
Well, I'll just go ahead and start by saying that, man, I am a big fan of science. As a kid, science, especially biological sciences, were like my jam. I like knowing how things work, and I like knowing and understanding not just my body, but the body of a bunny rabbit and the body of a crocodile. I like understanding plants and how they do what they do. And so to me, and because I am a later bloomer into Christian faith, I think science does an amazing job, especially on the biological side of science. It does an amazing job actually proving God more than it disproves God. When you really look at the intricacies of the way that living things are put together and how everything seems to work just so beautifully with one another. Like Randy said, God is a purposeful God, and he's a purposeful designer, and you can't dig too far under the surface of especially biological science and go, oh, this is all by happenstance or by accident. That would be irrational to think that, in my opinion. But because I understand the God of the Bible, I can look at science and go, all that is doing is proving the need for an almighty creator. And that's my viewpoint of science with God. It's not science against God. It's almost science for his existence. But here's the thing. There's going to be people that are just blind to that. They can look at science. They can look at the science of even just the human anatomy and go, oh, well, I can make this hypothesis or this hypothesis or this rationality as to how humans came to be or how they exist or whatever, just because they are blind to the things of God. And this isn't just exclusive to our generation. This has been going on from the get-go of humanity. In Romans 1, it says, for although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him, but their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. The verse before that says, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his creation, right? His invisible qualities, his eternal power and his divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. So God gave us everything on this planet, not so that it would lead us astray, but so that it would lead us to him, and understanding that he is in control and that he is the creator, and that he holds all the cards, and he's placed everything here for our enjoyment, but also to kind of show us the power and majesty of his hands. But yet people, us and our frailty, although we knew God, because remember, we're without excuse, although we knew God, we neither glorified him nor gave thanks to him, and we became darkened in our understanding of him. And what we just have now is generation after generation after generation after generation of very, very smart human minds going, hey, I think it's this, or I think it's this, or I think this thing's that old, and I think this thing's that old. And I think what happens a lot of time in science is we take a hypothesis as fact, when a hypothesis is not fact. It is an opinion that can be backed up by data, when that data is not even 100% factual either. And so I think a lot of us just kind of get darkened deeper and deeper in our understanding of who God is and the sovereignty of him by leaning too heavily into science as if it's fact or proof, because a lot of people really want proof. They want undeniable proof. And instead of looking into the word and trusting what it says, they go, well, I'm going to trust this data instead of this word. So that's how I'll start out.
It's almost like, too, when you look under a microscope, there is no explanation for what you see. Like, you can't explain, like, it's so awe-inspiring I remember in men's ministry, we were looking at different snowflakes and how each snowflake under a microscope has a different pattern, a different design. Each snowflake. And it's just, there's no explaining that. It's just amazing. No snowflake is similar. And when you look at those things it just shows you how amazing God is and how purposeful he is, how intentional he is, even in a snowflake. And so just think of how he designs us as amazing, and just thoughtful and purposeful. It's just explains his creativity more than our own. For us to rely on him more of like, you are God. We cannot explain this, which proves that you exist even more. Garrett, it looked like you had something to say a little earlier ago. What you got, man?
Well, the question was basically worded as like, is science enough, right? And so I agree with all that what you guys are saying. I think one of my favorite TV shows to watch is Planet Earth. And I know it's not from biblical perspective, so I'm not saying that. But when I watch that show, man, there's times when I start tearing up because I'm just like, this is so crazy. Like when they zoom in on frogs or whatever, and it's like these perfect like circumstances and situations had to match up perfectly for this guy to survive by eating this. It's just like, this is, me and Misty will just look, me and my wife will look at each other and we're just like, this is just crazy. Like who could ever come up with something like this? And I think I was going to go exactly to the verse that Kevin read. It talks about no one has an excuse because they can see the things that have been made. And it's like when you see, at least for me, it hasn't always been this way, but for me, science is the evidence that God exists. I mean, it really can't be overstated. Like there's like two ways of seeing it. When you see something like Planet Earth or a show like that, you either are like, wow, I can't believe this happened by accident, or you're like, this couldn't have happened by accident. Like there's no way this is possible. And back to the question though, is science enough? No, I don't think science is enough because there's things that we can't explain. Like one of the things I was thinking about, and there's so many examples, but one thing I was thinking about is like studies have shown over, when they look at cultures for thousands of years or whatever, and you look at their writings, for some reason, in general, over all cultures, morals in general have stayed the same. Like in general, cultures agree that you shouldn't murder each other. That's just a general, now not every single one, but in general, that's been a moral. Well, how do you explain that? Because lions don't feel that way when they eat zebras. They're not like sitting there wondering, morally, can I eat this zebra, or is it wrong for me to murder? Or even chimpanzees, like they'll eat each other. I watched that, not on Planet Earth, but some documentary like that. And it's like, they're not sitting there pondering like, is it wrong for me to murder this other chimpanzee? But for some reason, humans, there's something, so there's stuff like that that makes me think like science is such a great evidence of God. But no, it's not enough because it doesn't prove the larger things, whether it's the supernatural or the morality or just things that have existed for long times that no one can show, I guess.
Like how we got here.
I'm totally, exactly. I'm totally with you guys though. I don't think science at all is opposed to God. If anything, I think it makes more sense of who God is. And I think another thing I was thinking too is like, you'll hear atheists or people that call themselves atheists, they say they don't believe there's a God. I remember hearing one time that like no one can really be an atheist because if you say that, you yourself are saying that you're God, because that means you can be omnipresent and omniscient. You've searched all galaxies to see there's God. And so the point is, and that could go on and on, the point is that science is so beautiful and explains so much, but it doesn't explain everything. And like, even in like, I think it was years ago, there was some experiment done where they saw like a cell or they said they proved evolution or something. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what it was, because they saw this little cell that they had made and it, evolved with some attributes or something. But the point was that even those people, they had to create the perfect environment and place the original cell there. And so even if you go back in all of these different experiments and things, at the end of the day, there's someone who's always controlling that environment. There's someone that's controlling what started there. And so if you go back, even in creation, you'll always see that you can't have something come from nothing. There has to be somebody who started it all. So now I'm just rambling, but that's just some thoughts I had.
You're not rambling, man. You're not rambling. One of my favorite lessons that Randy has taught on was just carbon dating, and even with the how old the Earth is now. Science, they try to prove how old the Earth is, and they'll say it's millions of years old. And there's times where there's even flaws in science. So there's no flaw in God, and so especially in His creation, when you hear this, if we were any closer to the sun, we would burn. If we were farther away, we'd freeze. And it's just everything's just working in unity and perfect, and you can't explain that. Which makes science even cool to it's more when you look at the evidence of science, it's more cool to see how awesome God is. So.
Just to tie a couple of things up too. Kevin, you and Garrett kind of were speaking the same language when you're talking about the lens that people view the world through. And I think that's really important because when we talk about that conflict between science and God that some people see, I think a big chunk of that is the choosing of what you're going to allow to be a potential. So what I mean by that is there are some scientists who are atheistic, they're anti-God. And so when they search for the truth, they leave this chunk of things outside of their realm of possibility. So they say, well, we're just going to start with the premise that there is no God. So we can't look at anything through that lens. So then the next best hypothesis is the one we're going to go with. And my point is, when we're searching for truth, you can't exclude anything from a possibility. We don't know what the possibility is. So I think when we see scientists who look at things through the lens of biblical scripture, then you have a different perspective and you can look at things and say, okay, we know these certain truths because this is what God told us. And we're not looking to manipulate whatever data we take in to say, oh yeah, this must be the truth, because it couldn't be God. It would have to be this. And I'll give you an example, which I find that, the big I think there's two big questions when people are putting the conflict between God and science. And to me, the two big ones are evolution and the Big Bang and how did the world start. So I just want to speak to evolution really quick, because I always find this such an easy argument to make. If you think, if the theory of evolution says, hey, things can evolve and they can get better through their environment, and then a species can turn into another species. And the classic example is monkeys turned into humans. And to me, it's so incredibly easy to say, well, that theory doesn't hold water. And here's two things that I can point to. If a species of monkeys turned into humans, and the idea is the survival of the fittest, those beings with the better genes survived, and that's what brought out this species. Wouldn't you think that the old species would go away? So if we're the advanced monkey, why are there still monkeys? But here's the flip side of that. Not only are there monkeys, but there's nothing in between, because the evolutionists would say that we didn't start from monkeys and then suddenly one next generation we turned into people looking like, well, maybe not Kevin, but people like Garrett. They didn't come out looking like Garrett. So the question is, why if those in between species were better than monkeys, why aren't we seeing them? Why aren't they still here? Why are the monkeys still here? So when you look at it through an evolutionist eyes, they'll have all kinds of reasons why that would be, and they don't hold water. And real quick, Darwin even said that he believed we were going to find evidence of those in-between species. That was because his theory was that's how it would work. And so we should see fossils, we should see evidence of that. We haven't seen that. So it's an interesting thought process. So I just that was one of the things in my notes that I'll throw out there. Science does not explain everything, especially when they take out the truth from the realm of possibility. Go ahead, Kevin. You look like you had something to say.
I do, but I also have a lawnmower going off near me. So, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so I think what a lot of people have done with science is they have created an idol that replaces God. At our core, you don't have to go very far throughout Scripture to come to the realization that when creation was created, people were created with an internal desire to worship. They were created for an internal, or with an internal desire to worship. And throughout humanity, people have looked to different things other than God to satisfy the internal desire to worship. And in our generation, the last couple generations, science has become one of those idols. It's no longer the golden calf that they're looking at. Now it's this rationality, this reason, this proof for our own existence, making us supreme instead of God supreme. That's satisfying their desire to worship. But here's the thing: God, in and of himself, created science. He created our minds in such a way to think in abstract ways, to have this desire to solve problems, to have this desire to look deeper. There's no other species on this planet that does that in such a way. There's not, humans are unique. When you drive by a field full of cows, they're eating grass. They're not thinking to themselves, I wonder how this grass came to be. I wonder how it grows. I wonder why it's green. I wonder what the chlorophyll exchange units are in this blade. Like, they don't have that thought process. They see grass, they eat it, they know that somehow they're still alive until we take them to the butcher and send them to In-N-Out Burger. Like, we are the only species who thinks abstract that way, who has a desire to learn and to grow and to understand. And the reason that we do that even comes back to our design. It's characteristics of God, because he is a mindful God. He is a creative God. He is, he's a planned God and a controlled God. And he places those little things in our likeness of him that he builds into us. But before he built in those things, he built in a desire to worship. And that's where some people get goofy, is they're so hardened in their hearts and so blind in their understanding that they make science their God, when, like Randy said, it's not going to hold water in the long run because it has some fatal flaws. That's my 2 cents on that one.
That was a great 2 cents.
There's also I don't necessarily think this should be the leading argument to why, to why science isn't enough. But I mean, honestly, there's things that I've experienced in my relationship with God, and there's times when he's healed me that I cannot explain with science. Like, there's just no other way to put it. And I'm not saying that our experience should necessarily lead every conversation about this, but I don't think it should be absent of it either. Like, science isn't enough because I've experienced God. Like, I could say that confidently. I have experienced God. I know him. He's healed me. He hears me. He's with me. And science can't explain that. But real quick. I don't know.
Can I piggyback on that, though, real quick?
Yeah.
That's really great, because it's really practical. Think about this. You're going through something hard. Mm-hmm. You face a loss. You get diagnosed with cancer. Even something as simple as your truck breaking down. Felix, I miss you. But like, when the weight of the world comes against you, you're not going to go, oh, quantum physics. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I feel so much better. Like, no, that's not going to satisfy. That's not going to heal your heart. Your heart yearns for deeper things than that. All right, Gary, back to you.
I was just going to say, I was trying to think while you guys are talking how to say this, because I don't want it to be misinterpreted. But like, I think I also used to be scared kind of like, what if, not scared that people would disprove God, but scared that they would find something or come up with something that would, like, I guess, just deceive people into thinking that God wasn't real. But I think also something I've come to realize is, like, and again, I don't want this to be misinterpreted, but like, if the world was a little bit older than we think, for me, that still doesn't disprove God. And so it's like, I think we also just need to be careful to not be afraid, like, of science. Like, the reality is, like, and technology is evolving, again, small e. I'm not talking about evolution. I'm saying technology is getting better. So we see, like, super cool things. And, like, for me, that doesn't disprove God, though. I don't know if that's making sense. I'm trying to walk a thin line here, but, like, I think we don't need to be afraid of science, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, we need to obviously test it and be careful with what we just take as fact, but also, like, there's something so beautiful and freeing about knowing, like, even if something maybe was a little different than I always thought it was, that still doesn't change that God's my creator, like, that still doesn't change that he loves me. And so anyways.
Garrett, what I think you're talking about is humility. I think we need to be humble in our own understanding to recognize, Isaiah says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts and your ways are not my ways. We need to be humble to recognize this small understanding of what we have for the way the world works and the way the world has worked. We need to recognize that that's not the know all, be all, end all. So as Christians, we need to be, I agree with you, we need to be very careful to not say, especially to not say this is how it has to be unless it's biblical, unless it's right there in the Bible and it's coming straight from God. But your example is great because we do extrapolate that the earth must be 6,000 years old. Now, if it comes out that the earth isn't 6,000 years old because somewhere in there, God mentioned, by the way, we had this thing and I didn't write about it in the Bible because you didn't need to know that, whatever. I think we've got to be humble in what we think we know and recognize that we don't know it all. And I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole, but I'm going to show you the rabbit hole because I think this is super fun. We are doing a study of heaven. And it's been amazing to me at the kind of spiritual angst that people have because we have this conception of heaven. And when you start to study heaven and you realize when you start pulling scripture and looking at what it says heaven's going to be like, the possibilities are really out there. So, and I'm going to give you two things just to chew on. I'm not going to go down them. But one of the things is Kevin mentioned that we were designed to learn, to grow, to innovate, to do all these things. Why wouldn't we be doing that in heaven? Which means potentially, I don't know, I haven't been there, but potentially we could have technology in heaven. Why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we continue to do things? And I mentioned that in our small group and the air got sucked out of the room and people were like, no way, And I said, I don't know. I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm just saying that it's a possibility. Who knows? And the other thing, and this is really way out there, so I'm just going to tell you this. Who's to say that God hasn't created life on other planets? Who's to say that after we go to heaven, we won't explore other planets? We won't do
Speaking my language, Randy. You're speaking my language right there. So we won't go down that because I could go on for a while with that one too.
Yeah, I think there's interesting stuff, but we have to not. It's not up to us to limit God. Now, that's all within the bounds of Scripture. So, and that's what I told my small group. I don't think there's anything wrong with dreaming about heaven and dreaming about science, but then there are bounds of Scripture that God says, this is how it was. So if we go back and say, hey, aliens created the world. No, aliens didn't create the world. God created the world in 7 days. We know that. But anyway, I just wanted to show you the rabbit hole just to think through what is science about.
I think too, it's important to understand, I don't believe anything could disprove God. I think everything points to God. And I don't think there will be anything that could disprove him. I think that people have been trying to do that for years and it hasn't happened. We've already passed the halfway point of all human knowledge a little while ago and they still can't do it. And even when the rapture comes, people still aren't going to say that means that there's no God. Everything continues to point to him. So I don't think there will ever be a point of anything that could disprove that there is a God that has created this whole universe and everything that goes on. To the all the way back at the beginning with Adam and Eve. They were wiser than we will ever be because they were perfect. They were created perfect. We are affected by sin, so we will never even be able to comprehend or think the way they did. The fact that Noah could build an ark that's ventilated, that has probably crazy systems that help with poop and things like that, that we wouldn't be able to duplicate that today, to withhold the storm of the flood that actually happened. It wasn't a peaceful flood that sometimes illustrations point out, but how they made the pyramids with the lack of technology that they had and things like that is beyond comprehension. So I don't think anything will ever be able to disprove God. So I don't think we have to ever worry about that. I think just the science is fun to learn, to continue to learn of God's amazingness, and really how we can't really understand him fully. Even when we get to heaven, like Randy said, we're going to continue to learn, continue to grow. That's what should make science fun, and it won't be ever a time where it will disprove God. So, any closing thoughts?
No, I think that's awesome. Way to go,
Fun.
Matt.
Good job, everyone. That was a good topic. We had a couple things with evolution, with science, with heaven. We did a lot of cool things. So thank you guys. That was a fun topic, and we look forward to next time. If you have any questions, submit. Let us know what you think, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. Take care. God bless.
All right. Be well.
Bye for now.
There you go. I was waiting for that.